Hello, I'm Mike S. I'm an alcoholic. I've dreaded this moment for a long time. I learn a lot of things in life slowly, but I do learn them. And one of them is this. Politeness doesn't always pay off. I don't practice it often, but now I'm going to practice it even less often. A couple weeks ago, Bob said, "What step would you like to speak on at Stateline?" And I strangely said, "Wherever you need me, Bob." I didn't mean it. And then the week before last, I get this text that I'm speaking on the fourth step, sex and fear. Now, so far, the people who've spoken on each of the steps seem to be related to those topics. I believe he made a mistake in this condition. I'll answer some of the questions that were asked before I came up here today. There will be no demonstrations. I appreciate the offers, but I am I'm open to the idea of calling on people who would like to share any humiliating sexual experiences that they've had. You know, I represent Alcoholics Anonymous up here, whether I feel like it or not today. And I need to be really careful because it's the kind of topic that could lend itself to some raunchy humor, which I know most of you want, but could also be very offensive. And so I'm going to try to walk I have to be careful on my words, too. A hard line. And not be offensive. No, somebody's already shaking their head. See, I'm done. This is a bad one. Now, and imagine, those of you out there who aren't speaking this weekend, if you finally got invited to speak somewhere that you like going to, and I've been here before, and then you follow the lineup I just followed. I mean, my God. It'd be like going to a karaoke bar and first Adele singing, right? Harry Styles, maybe Mick Jagger comes in, and they go, "Hey, how about you? Come on up." Ralph, I would drink some NyQuil right now if I could. I believe I have a cold. And one more little aside, just to waste another moment or two. When people drink water from a podium, I get thirsty. I don't know what there is. It makes water like the most precious thing on earth to me, especially the sound of the plastic bottle crinkling. Kent started it the other day, and honest to God, the speakers that I've heard so far, without just trying to be complimentary to fish for a compliment, they were outstanding. I mean, really and truly outstanding ideas. I appreciate all of you. It isn't easy. No, they don't need that. We don't need to get carried away. It's like, okay, you did you did a good job, but we're moving on now. One of the things that I've been taught, I've been sober since May the 30th, 1980, so I've been sober a little over 41 years. And now go right ahead. It's a happy group. And one of the things that has become extremely apparent to me is that whenever I speak, whether it's at a podium or just sharing at a small meeting at my home group on Monday night, what I owe people is the truth. I have to be careful not to try to have an image, to defend a position, to look a certain way, or to get your approval. I've spent all my life needing your approval to excess. It's a character defect, huh? Didn't recognize it as that. Didn't know a lot of things. Still don't know. But one of the things I need to share, or when I share that I need to be really cautious of, is this: that I tell you the truth about me. That I tell you the hard times as well as the good times. Because if I'm the only one at a meeting who's having a bad time and all the rest of you are always happy, joyous, and free, then I don't belong here either. It's a place I don't fit. Because my life isn't that one level. It isn't that one-sided. It's a combination of things. I've spent most of my life being tortured by my own mind, being put in positions mentally that make life much more difficult than it ever needed to be. And I want to add something. It was not my fault. And I don't mean that in a funny way. What I mean is this. I was raised to believe, or at least I picked up the notion, that I had to know the answer, whatever it was. I don't know where that came from. Well, I have some ideas where that came from. But it doesn't make any difference. You know, there's a line in the big book where Bill Wilson's writing, and he said we had to quit playing God. I never saw myself as trying to play God, because the God I knew about had nothing to do with my life. Not in the sense of taking care of any details. Not in the sense of really giving any guidance or even getting involved, that was the way it was so eloquently explained by some of these other speakers. I assumed that my role in the world was to make it, whatever it happened to be. You know, we had a really strong doctor who influenced a lot of Bill Wilson's thought, a doctor named Dr. Harry Tebow. And he's written about in the big book a little mention, and then in some articles in the Grapevine. And Dr. Tebow had a lot of positions that I find very helpful in understanding things. But one of them was this. He said, and other speakers have mentioned the word ego, that the arch enemy of sobriety is the ego. That it's the whole point of the steps to reduce the human ego. And when I look back on my life, drunk and sober, I've spent an awful lot of it trying to increase my ego, trying to bolster my ego, trying to make sure that it didn't get decreased. I took actions, not even consciously, that were to make me special, to make me stand out. And the reason I know today is this. I didn't feel that way, really. There was a fear. One of my topics is fear, I look back on my world, and I have been afraid since I can remember. But I wouldn't have called it fear. I would have called it a lot of other things, because I think fear disguises itself. I think fear comes up as other words, other ideas, other thoughts. I don't recognize it as it sneaks back into my world over and over again. Before I get too much into the fear thing, let me talk about how I ended up staying in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am a bad drinker. If you were somewhere in my drinking days, you never had to ask, has he been drinking? You know what I'm saying? I not only slur words, I look slurred. I have the ability to look slurred. I've never heard anybody say, you know what, I really like it when you're drinking. You're a fine fellow when you drink. You're a lot of fun. Nobody ever held me up as an example to other teenage friends. Their parents never said, hey, why don't you drink like Mike drinks? I suffer from a condition when I drink that causes me to take actions totally out of what would be my normal character, and I like them. That's the worst part. I enjoy them if I remember them. Sometimes I don't remember them. But my point is this. I was a horrible drinker who was depressed and angry in the world, and it was at a time in my life when life was going well. One of the things that I know I suffer from today, just as much as I did drinking, was I suffer from the delusion that I know what it is that's going to make me happy. And I really believe it over and over again. And if that were true, I've had my way happen a lot. If it were true that I would really be okay if I could just get my way, I should have been happy a long time ago. But for me, it requires getting my way always and never having to deal with the reality that life doesn't treat me. Now, I'm not stupid. I know that not everything's going to go my way. But my inability to handle that causes something in me that amounts to an almost constant fear. There are a lot of words for fear, aren't there? I mean, there's terror, there's fear, but they're more subtle words, but they're the same thing, just to less degree, I think. There's worry. There's some concern. There's anxiety. And when anxiety hits in someone like me, there's a way to fix it. There always was. If I take a drink, my anxiety lessens considerably. It starts to free me from that inner turmoil, that need to be somebody. Dr. Tebow said something like this. He said he admired us in Alcoholics Anonymous for a lot of reasons, but one of them was that we had the steps, a plan of action that was meant to reduce the human ego. He gave an example. He said it's better to call, we use a term in AA called trusted servant. So we don't single out anybody for special recognition or awards, I guess, anything like that. That we're all just here. If somebody has a great ability to speak or dance or sing or read or whatever they do, that's great. They're members of AA. But the reality is, what I want, and I'll work backwards into the two topics, don't worry. I know it's a very lustful group. I'll get to that in a minute. You know, if it hadn't been for women and alcohol, I would have had a good life. And I've known that since I was a kid. My father owned a little bar in upstate New York, and it was on the corner. It was a kind of joint that never seemed to close. It had that smell of a little bar. My grandmother had a small restaurant kind of attached to it. We're Italian. She cooked Italian food. The smell of the garlic and the booze and it was as good as a cathedral walking in that little joint for somebody like me. And when I was real small, I'd go in when we were back home again because we'd moved away. We'd go back. We'd sit up at the bar, and my brother and I would drink Coca-Cola out of shot glasses. And it was exciting to see the guys in the corner making their horse racing bets, planning the bookie. My family used bookies even when it was legal to bet in New York. You know what I mean? It just was. If it had a little more of an evil quality to it, it was a better deal. And so I'd see all those guys laughing and talking in the morning. It was before the trouble started in the afternoon. It was before the people got really drunk. It was when it was just fun to come on in there and be relaxed. Because alcohol, I guess, did for them what it did for me. No matter how worried or fearful and tense I was about today, tomorrow, guilt about the past. And by the way, I think remorse or regret carries with it just a huge element of fear. There's also regret and sadness for hurting other people, if I can muster that. But beyond that, there's regret and fear that I made a mistake. I have spent too much of my life worried about making a mistake. If I could raise a little baby now and give it any kind of mental comfort that would maybe help it in its life, here's what I'd want to give it. I'd want to tell her or him this. Look, hon, it's okay not to know. You won't always know. It's okay not to make a mistake. Or to make a mistake. It's okay to be places where you feel out of place. It's not the end of the world. It's okay to just be all right. You know, in AA, when it first came in, one of the most significant things I heard people talking about, the hook, the happiness, like the laughter this morning when the speakers were talking, and the joy and the hope. Because what they all gave us, so far at least gave me, is the same thing I get at meetings all the time. The thing I lack by myself. hope. I slip into a despair that doesn't contain hope. I slip into seeing the world in the way I've always seen it, and it's not a fun place to be. But I go to meetings for a lot of reasons, and one of the main ones is that kind of hope, that life really could really be okay. Even if I don't, there's no requirement in AA to do anything right. It helps, but there's no requirement. If it's not a 4th step, but a 10th or 11th step, who really cares? You, but no one else really cares. But if it's not written in 4 columns, but maybe you did 6 today by mistake, I don't think God cares. But when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, the real hook for me was this. People said we were supposed to be happy, joyous, and free. And I was the opposite of happy, joyous, and free. I'll tell you what I have come to the conclusion of in the last couple of years, though, that even means more to me than that. What I want to get out of working the steps and being useful to other people, the reward for me personally, the selfish reward, if you will, I want to be content. I want to be okay with who I am right now without having to have anything else added or even taken away. And it's here. Who is it in the room? I don't know. Sometimes I can pick out the people and sometimes I can't. But it's not always the funniest guy. It's not always the most clever. Sometimes. The freedom from the bondage of self for me, of course, would include the freedom from some fear. But here's what I've been taught. That it's our instincts gone astray that turn into character defects when they've exceeded their general purpose. I married a lady a couple of times. A different lady, by the way. But and when I first got married to this one wife, she said to me, "What are your hobbies?" My hobbies were what we would call defects of character. I spent my life looking for the things I'm about to talk about, for a simple reason. They're exciting. There's a lot of pleasure in it. And because it keeps me out of thinking. When I'm chasing something, it keeps me out of thinking about the reality of the way my life really is and the way I feel. You know, I look back on fear. I was thinking about it because I got assigned to this terrible topic. By the way, I just saw myself on the monitor. I think Marilyn Slater and I are twins. I dyed my hair to be the same color as yours, Marilyn. I've lost my train of thought. I'm so fascinated with my own image. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I want to say this, another preface before I ever get to the topic, or maybe I'm hoping I never get there and time runs out, all right? Anything else you'd like to talk about? When I read the Big Book for the first time by myself, I had done it on my second to the last night in a treatment center, and I had no desire to get sober that I was aware of. No desire. If you'd have asked me, why do you want to stop drinking, the truth would have been, I don't want to stop drinking. My wife wants me to stop drinking. My boss wants me to stop drinking. The police would probably appreciate it if I stopped drinking. A guy in a bar gave me my first Big Book. I mean, people were very, very supportive of my recovery. But a little man came in to talk to us on a Sunday night, and he was the H&I panel, the Hospital Institutions panel. And I've told this to a lot of you too many times, but it was an important event for me because anger and fear that night played a huge role. I'm watching TV, and they said, you got to turn it off and go to this little meeting. And I'm furious that I have to go. So I'm already in a bad mood. I'm in a bad mood anyway all the time. It was just an accelerated bad mood. It was exaggerated. And I walked in, and I'm pouting and thinking about my new life. I'm going to get a divorce. I'm going to move to the beach. I'm going to get out of my job, because I'm always convinced it's something outside of me that's going to make it finally feel all right inside. And it never does, ever. Because the emptiness I have in me has nothing to do with that connection, but I don't know that. Not when my emotions are running as strong as they run. So I go into the room, and they said the H&I panel's here. And as you all know, a panel should be 2 or more people. And it was one guy sitting alone at a table. And so I started explaining to the other patients, that's not a panel. Yeah, you have to have 2 or more for a panel. And they looked at, a couple of the guys looked at me and said, shut up. Would you shut up? Which I can't do sometimes. I couldn't shut up, but I pouted and sat there. Well, now I hated them too, and I'm mad at them, and I'm mad at the panel. And the panel's blabbing like I'm doing. And he said, do you want to know what I found here in Alcoholics Anonymous? And I thought, no. God, no. I'd been to 7 meetings by then. I knew what he'd found. He found God. Oh, yay. That's great. I pray for me. All right, I'm not going. He made friends. I still had him. I was calling him all the time on the payphone. Or maybe he found an AA potluck somewhere. Huh? Oh, yeah. I'll bring the chips. He irritated me so much. That's why I think sometimes defects of character are very effective. I was so irritated with him that I focused on him, because I wanted him to know I was irritated. And I thought he could sense it some way, my hatred. And he said it a second time, you want to know what I found here? And I'm thinking, no, nobody in the room wants to know. Leave us alone. Just let me go back to my thinking. I got plans. And he said, I'm going to tell you what I found. Now I'm really pissed, right? I was like, why'd you ask us twice if you were going to force us to listen? And here's what he said. He said, I have a higher degree of mental comfortableness. I have peace of mind. And I'd never had peace of mind. Never. You can't have peace of mind when you're afraid all the time. And my fear basically comes from the real simple position, but a difficult one to do much about, at least by myself. I'm trying to figure out what to do next. I can call it a million things, but that's what I'm really doing. I'm thinking about what it is I have to have happen just to be able to be okay, just to be able to breathe, just to be able to get out from under. I've spent almost all of my life getting ready to leave, wherever I am. I don't leave. I just think about it a lot. I've spent all of my life thinking if I just had made this other choice. And that's just another form of fear. If I'd have just made this other choice, my life would have been so much better. To stay in a constant state of confusion, driven by fear that I've done something wrong or I'm about to. I don't mean wrong from the punishment. I didn't care about being punished. I went to a Catholic school most of my life. One year I used to get whipped every single day. Every day for bad behavior. I might have missed a couple days, but it was pretty close to every day. And the nice thing about that was they would put our names on the board early. As soon as you did some offense, a whippable offense, they would put it up there, and then you knew you'd have to stay after class and get swats. I'd get it out of the way about 8:15. You know what I'm saying? Be like, all right, I'm done. Consequences never seemed to bother me to the extent they probably should have. But I heard that little man talk about the fact that there were people on earth that actually liked their lives. And I know today as an old man in Alcoholics Anonymous that what he was talking about is he didn't live in a constant state of fear. He wasn't always worried. I'm not saying he wasn't worried. I got to be around Chuck Chamberlain when I was new. I even got to spend some time alone with him. And I wanted to believe the kind of things that he and some of you who spoke so far believe. That there really was a higher power that took care of the details of our lives. I mean, I can stand at a podium and say, well, you know, the antidote to fear is faith. And thank you, good night. And then go home and be terrorized all the way home by my own thoughts. Chuck used to say this. He said, if I ask you in the room how many of you believe in God, I'd probably get 95%. But if I ask you how many of you trust God, I'd probably get an entirely different answer. I don't trust God sometimes. And it's not because I don't want to trust God. And it's not because I think that you shouldn't trust God. I don't know what God does. I don't know what his role is and what mine is. I'm not smart enough to figure it out. But the people in AA were smart enough. And they started making me take actions better than the way I think and feel. In the big book, most everything is written in past tense, right? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. We came to believe. That doesn't mean I came in here with those understandings. So if somebody said to me, did you work the first step yet? And I'm real new, the answer is, I don't know. I think I might be powerless over alcohol, would be a more honest answer. So how did fear end up making me? Let me give you some examples of how it had messed up my life so much. I was talking to a friend of mine recently from another state, and we were talking about getting married. I thought of this example this morning. I got married 2 different times totally out of fear. I think there are better motives, but it's a motive. It's the best one I could come up with. Because I knew in both situations I shouldn't have gotten married. I knew it. I was never the marrying kind of man. I'm a bar guy. I'm not somebody you'd want to base your comfort on. Financially, I was always a good provider. I was always there and did those kind of things. But I'm talking about trust. I'm talking about being secure that when you come home, I'll actually be home. That I won't be leaving. I was dating a lady one time in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she said to me, are you going to hurt me too? And the truth was, yeah, I was. I didn't plan to. But I lived a life that is so unsatisfying and so fearful that I make decisions to try to relieve that, not because I'm setting out to hurt anybody. Fear has caused me to make those. In both the marriage situations, both of those ladies said, we've been dating a long time. Either we get married or it's over. Which I wanted it to be over. Until it was their idea. And I thought, well, what if I miss them later? And so I made decisions based on self. And here's what I know today to be the truth. And I've talked about this a lot when Bob and I are together, speaking places. The biggest benefit I've ever received from sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous is this. If I'm being honest with my sponsor, and I'm telling him I was scared to give this talk today. When I'm being honest with my sponsor, I'm able to get direction absent the emotion that's driving me, or at least less than. And I can then move forward and maybe not make the kind of mistake that fear. When I'm acting with fear as the basis for the driving force, the odds are better that I will make a poor choice. They're almost always a poor choice. One of the hardest things for a person of my emotions is to sit still, to be quiet, to not make a decision in the heat of an emotion, especially if it's from fear. So what are the fears? Just real quickly. As a little kid, I was afraid to speak in class, even when I knew the answer. I jokingly talk about the fact that at bingo games, I won't yell out bingo even if I get it, right? Fearful that it may not be an 067. I don't know. What if I misheard it? Fear that I'm going to walk into a room and people won't like me even if they don't know me. Fear that I'm going to be sitting alone when everybody else is talking and laughing. Now, they don't always consciously pop up that way. I know what they are later on. It's a feeling of being uncomfortable at a level that is anxiety. I didn't create it. The fourth step isn't a fix-it step. It's not the solution to whatever defective character, but it's an awareness. Taking a fourth step for me made the difference between me just going, I don't feel good, and having some insight as to why I don't feel good. Why am I so scared of you? There's a girl from the Pacific group that speaks out of my home group every year, and she said she is so worried about other people's opinion of her that she will lay in the sun and tan even when she doesn't want to, just so you'll compliment her. Huh? How many times have I bought clothes I don't even like just so you'll like them? Never, actually. But I think about it. If I stop and look at most motivations, there's a fear-driven base to them, which leads me to sex. I'll call on volunteers soon. And I want to do this in a gentlemanly way today. I have never... My pursuit of sex has caused more pain in my life and more destruction than probably any other thing I've ever done. And I didn't know that. Oh man, I knew some of the obvious things. I didn't understand. I started drinking and met a girl the same summer within a couple weeks of my drinking career, and the combination of all that exhilaration and excitement was fantastic. I'm old enough to have grown up in a time when we claimed we had free love. Wasn't that free, trust me. But the whole emphasis in my crowd was to score, to win, to have sex, to move on, to be carefree. Now, what I didn't understand about my own personality is I wasn't going to be able to do that without guilt. I wasn't going to be able to do that without shame. There's some topics that are almost too sensitive to speak of, I think, in a big meeting like this one, but I often will do it at a men's retreat. The chasing after the things that I wanted to have sexually destroyed some lives. And I don't mean people that were living yet. There was a huge toll. And I thought for the longest time I could just go on taking actions and ignoring the consequences. Because my whole drive was just to be somebody and to have what I wanted to have. And if that meant sex too, then even better. I honestly had gotten to and I'd been raised differently. I was raised within a family that was fairly strict in that sense. I was raised in a church that was fairly strict in that sense. But I thought somehow I could behave the way I wanted to behave and not pick up a tab. And it didn't happen. And we don't tell each other how to behave sexually. I know some guys in AA that are about as free and sexually driven as anybody I knew back in the day, huh? And if they can get away with it, fine. But I can tell you this, and it's not a lecture for anybody, because I have no room to judge anybody in this respect. But when you've destroyed families, You've broken up families. And you've hurt people at the level I've hurt them. And then you wonder why you're not feeling good in the world. There's really not a big secret. No secret. The pursuit of what I've wanted in life has a price with it. I can have it. I can go today and do whatever it is that's driving me instinctually. And I want to someday. So here's the worst part. Knowing all that didn't go, well, that's it, I don't want sex anymore. By the way, I apologize. I know old people speaking about sex is disgusting. It creeps me out, but it's like, oh no, please don't tell us. You didn't. Tell me you didn't do that. Well, okay, I didn't. It was talking about other people. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, no. I remember when I realized my parents must have had sex to have me. I couldn't look at them anymore. It's like, oh God, no. Stop. So I won't get. I will just tell you this. When Bill Wilson wrote in the 12 and 12, I think it was, who can imagine liking lust? I guess he hadn't met this crowd. Because a lot of the men I have sponsored have very similar drives that have cost them dearly. I'm an advocate for enjoying all of the appetites God gave us. I think it's great to be able to live up to whatever I can. But I know this. Once I started to work the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm jumping ahead, and once I had even a better realization, because it wasn't like I didn't know the behavior was bad. I knew that. I ignored the fact that it was bad, hoping I could escape any kind of guilt. I didn't know I was going to miss my children so much after I left their mom one day when she was at the supermarket. I didn't know I would spend years missing them. I'd block it out. I'd still go to the bars and I'd chase and I'd get on to the next one. But the torture inside was tremendous. And so I encourage anybody that needs to keep doing the way I lived, keep it up. Because I think one of two things will happen. The destruction will be so bad, life will be over fairly soon. Or the pain will be so great, maybe it'll motivate like it did for me. So when I came into AA and I heard people talk in a general way about fear, I had no problem at all understanding what fear was. I was scared of the dark as a kid. I was scared my parents were going to get divorced when I was young, when they would fight. My dad was an alcoholic. I was scared to walk into new schools. I'd been to 9 new schools by the time I was in 9th or 10th grade. I was always walking in somewhere new, and I was afraid of people. But I didn't know it as that. I just knew I had a panicky feeling inside. So what do I do? Well, I can't talk about it on this step. But let me just say this much about the sex stuff and finish it up. When I did my inventory, my 4-step inventory, my first one, my sponsor gave me this little worksheet. It was pretty simple. And I told him the truth. And I can't tell you why I told him the truth. I mean, I wanted to withhold some of that. He gave me this kind of a saintly advice. I'd ask him to sponsor me. He was a member of the Pacific Group. And he told me I was going to get divorced and move and do a lot of things. And he said, you know what? You're not doing any of those for at least a year. And by the way, you're a married man. You keep your zipper zipped. Well, I almost quit that night, but right after he had told me that, I'm at it's not my little meeting, it's my speaker meeting, and I've been looking at this blonde across the room happily. And she came up to me at the end of the meeting and she said, "Where are you going?" And I gave a brilliant answer like, "I don't know." And she said, "Oh, relax, I know you're married, but I'm lonesome." She said, "Why don't you come over to my house tonight, no strings attached?" You know, I'd been going to bars all my life waiting to hear that. But Donna just told me to act like a married man, and I did. I remember I went home that night and I was looking at my wife, and I never hated her more than that particular evening. And I bragged to my sponsor, because I wanted him to know he had a stud, and about this little encounter, and he said, "Oh, it's not you. She's a sick lady. Got nothing to do with you." Hurt my feelings. The next week, she's holding hands with another newcomer. I was jealous. By the way, the sex stuff has... I was going to get into that. I won't have time today for your sake. But sex isn't... The sex problem, for me at least, isn't just about me engaging in sex or chasing sex or any of the rest of it. It's the other things. It's the fear that goes along with sex. The first time you're with somebody, maybe, huh? The first time you have to deal with your own body issues if you have them. The first time there's guilt, or the second time, or the 100th time. The jealousy that comes with sex was huge. Because when I see her holding that guy's hand, I'm thinking, I'm enraged. I don't even know her, and I'm enraged. I get attached easily, and even at the hope of something, I'm attached. Okay, I'd have married her if she'd asked that night. But the next week, those two came in, and they were both drunk. They were newcomers. And for the first time that I'm aware of, I caught the connection between behavior and sobriety. Not behave because it's a sin, not behave because other people get mad at you, but it may affect your sobriety. And I don't know why even that knew it was important for me not to take that chance. I was told, like most of us, I believe, when I came in here, that there's a loving God that doesn't care what we did, still loves us anyway. Just genuine love. I wanted to believe that was true too, but didn't believe it. But I found out it was true. Because my life, when I started taking the actions of sobriety, turned around 100%. My life got good. I felt freer inside. Things started to happen to me that you've heard described by the other guys that spoke. Great events came to pass for me, things that were impossible. I couldn't get a job that first year, and by the end of that year when I was applying for work, I got offered a position that ended up leading to the career I've had today. But I have to remember this about me. When things happen in my life, I judge them as good or bad instantly and way too soon. It almost feels like it's the final chapter, but it really is just the beginning, but I don't know that. And I'll embarrassingly say later on when things have worked out, God, why didn't you just tell me they were going to work out? And yet he does all the time, doesn't he? We tell each other at every meeting, it's going to be okay. Just let go and let God. It's going to be a surrender. It'll be okay. But when you're full of fear, it's hard to surrender. But it is possible. I can take the actions of surrender even if the emotions haven't caught up. I can act as if the fear at least isn't going to control me even when the fear is still present. It doesn't have to be gone first. When I went to that new job, I was terrified walking in. I didn't know anybody in there. I called my sponsor and said, I'm going home. I'm not staying here. And he says, no, you're not. You're given 1 year. And one more time I sat still through the fear, not because I wanted to, but because I don't know why. But because I heard you all say you did those things and it worked out well. And the little bit of hope from that I didn't truly trust came true for me. The people I know in here know I ended up going to law school because of that job on nights and weekends. I became an attorney and I had an unbelievable career. I was a prosecutor. I was in charge of homicide for a big county. I made my living in a courtroom dealing with violence and ugliness and fear. It was a perfect place for me. But I would have missed it because of my own fear. I would have walked away from all of it. And so when I In a court, there's two kinds of evidence. There's direct evidence and there's circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence, if I walk in and my daughter's eating chocolate cake at the table, that's direct evidence. I just saw it. But if I come home and the piece of chocolate cake is missing and there's chocolate crumbs going down the hall and little chocolate handprints on the wall, and I walk in and she has icing on her face, that's indirect evidence that she's guilty. You know what I'm saying? Pretty good evidence. So when people like you or Chuck or just my everyday friends in AA said things like, just trust God, I believe there is circumstantial evidence that there really is a God by watching what happens to you. I believe that when you tell me you went through whatever you did and now look at your life, that's evidence. I don't have to know that there's a God. I don't even have to define God. I don't have to know what God's role really is in order to get a result. Fear will block me from doing that. It will tell me, no, go do something else. That can't be true. It can't be true. It's like the man, we've told the story to ourselves a lot in meetings. A man walking along at night that Father Martin used to talk about when he falls off a cliff. It's pitch black and he's terrified and he reaches out and he finally grabs hold of a branch sticking out the side of the hill. And when he can speak, he yells out, God, if you're up there, help me. And God yells back down, I'm up here. Let go of the branch. The man yells back, anybody else up there? No? That's where I am. And the story ends and when morning comes, the sun comes up, he's only hanging a foot off the ground. All he had to do was let go at any time. But fear wouldn't let him let go. Fear wouldn't let him let go. And I'll throw sex into that mix again just to keep you stimulated. When an emotion like sex is so strong and the drive is so hot at that particular moment, it is easy for me to totally ignore everything I know because it's not about knowledge. And so I believe what Bill Wilson writes in the Big Book. If I'm praying to God and asking Him to direct my thinking correctly about sex or any other issue, I stand a much better chance of not making that mistake. I don't think God wants us to refrain from enjoying things, including sex. But I do know that it can be a real pitfall for some of us. I've shared about abortion from the podium before. And I've shared about people cheating on their spouses before. And invariably, I take that risk, even though I don't like doing it much, or at all, because there's somebody in the audience about to make a decision. And I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. I'm not talking about morals or sin or mortal sin or anything like that. What I'm talking about is there's a consequence to all of that that may be too much to handle and could cause you to go back to drinking. I don't know. The same loving God that was here for me when I was new and I confessed to my sponsor all of those horrible things I had done, and there was a big list. And everybody assured me God would forgive me, didn't care, loved me. Is still here today, even if you've been sober a while and make another bad choice. If God really is love, He doesn't go away just because we've got some time in sobriety, in my opinion. And I don't mean God says everything you do, there won't be a consequence. I know there's a consequence to bad actions. What I mean is I don't think it comes from God. In my business, we used to go out to homicide scenes. And I would go out and I'd see the destruction that people like me do to other people. And invariably, in the follow-up to that, either in trial or at church for a service, a burial or whatever, some well-meaning person offers some comfort by saying things like, we don't understand God's will for us. Maybe God needed another little angel, I heard a couple of times. That's not the God I have in my life. I don't think God does one bad thing to me to teach me a lesson. I think my own actions carry with them their own punishment, if there is going to be punishment. And I think God's there to help me get through it. I don't think He's happy with my behavior sometimes. But I do think this: I don't have to run and hide from God just because I've made a bad choice. Just because I've made a decision based on fear or sex or any dishonesty or anything else doesn't mean I'm not a good member in good standing of AA. Sometimes it appears people will say things at meetings like, well, maybe you're not working the steps when you're in a bad place. But here's what I think. I think sometimes I work the steps better when I'm in a bad place, when I'm not doing so well in life, when life isn't going on like the way I wanted it to. I dig deeper into what do I believe. The answer to all of my problems could be reliance on God, like we're taught. But there will always be a certain block for me as long as fear exists, and fear will exist till I die. It's not going away. What I have to do is try to recognize it for what it is and not always give in to it. And if I do give in to it, then just move on and do it again. Try something else. I know you wanted, or not you, let me start over. I suppose I could have told some other stories about some of that conduct that would have been a little happier, but I didn't feel like it today. I thought it was important to tell what's really going on with me. And I regret a lot of that stuff. I wish to God that some of those things had not happened. But having said that, if they hadn't happened, I wouldn't be in a position to even know anything about it. I wouldn't understand. And so I try to take what I can from those things. And when I slip back into too much remorse, to pop out and go, you know what? You're doing it again. Regret is turned into fear that you made too much of a mistake. Self-criticism will kill me. It will kill me over and over again. Because it isn't the kind of criticism that's loving. It's torturous criticism. And so I have the steps in you and a sponsor to be able to tell the truth to. I'll tell you how, as I end up this little deal. I didn't mind being an alcoholic. It didn't seem to bother me until you suggested alcoholics shouldn't drink. Then I did start to mind. I wasn't too sure anymore. And one night, I was on homicide call out back in the days when they had a beeper. And I was speaking at the Church of the Nazarene over in Redlands, California. And I'd left the number in case anything happened. And sure enough, I'm finishing up my talk. And the secretary, the phone rings in the kitchen. She goes back and comes back with a piece of paper and says, Sergeant so-and-so from the sheriff's office is here, or wants you on the phone, needs to call, there's been a killing. I panicked. I got down from the podium, I thought, oh my God, he knows I'm here. I went back and I grabbed the phone and called him. And I said, I got to tell you something. Don't say anything for a minute. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, okay. And the reason I told him that is I was afraid he thought I went to the Church of the Nazarene. That's a true story. That was the first conscious thing that I had hit me. I thought I was not that Church of the Nazarene was bad, but it was like I didn't want him to think I go to church, for God's sakes. You know, what will he think of me? That's not manly. A few weeks later, I'm speaking at this little treatment center, Kaiser Hospital, and they wheel that guy, the sergeant, in a wheelchair. He's been admitted as a patient. And then I'm out on a homicide call one night, and he's the sergeant in charge. It's a full moon. It's probably about 2 a.m. And the deceased is laying there. There's law enforcement everywhere. And he comes over and he says to me, I got my 90 days today. Give me a hug. I didn't want to give him a hug. I have a reputation. But he's a big, strong guy, so I'm hugging him like, okay, here we go. Yeah. He killed himself a few weeks later because he couldn't get what we got. His fears were huge. I knew him pretty well. His worry about his job and about what people thought of him and about all those kind of things, the same fears I have. The plagues that make life so uncomfortable. I ask God for a lot of things when I'm about to speak somewhere. One is to be useful to somebody. And the other is not to beat myself up too much about the talk in case I don't like it. I owe you the truth. Not to be an image, but to be a human being, an alcoholic man who has lots of faults. A man who suffers, who worries, who doesn't trust God all the time. But all I have to do is keep going to the meetings and trying to be useful, and you'll get me back on the path when I can't get on it by myself. Thanks for letting me share.